So are you a player that's struggling with shallowing the golf club in the downswing? It's something you see a lot of players struggling with, and perhaps a lot of players trying to do it the wrong way. In this video, I'm going to share a couple of key things that you need to have in place in order to allow you to be able to go ahead and shallow that golf club. So let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Danny Malcolm. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video. Today I'm going to be having a discussion about how to shallow the golf club and two key things that need to be in place for you to be able to do that. Before we do, if you're new to the channel, please consider liking and subscribing by clicking the button below. Lots more great content to come. And I'm also now offering online coaching to golfers all around the world. So if you're interested in personalized coaching with myself, where you can send videos through via a very simple to use app on any area of the game, driving, pitching, irons, putting, whatever it may be, and I'll send a detailed analysis back with lines and a discussion as to what you need to work on and why, along with a personalized video like this, going through those drills and the path forward to improve your game. So if you're interested in more information on this, please click the button above. So into today's video, shallowing the golf club. It's a term you see a lot online, and it's important. It's an important move to deliver the club in an efficient way into impact. So sometimes a lot of people are doing this wrong, and I just want to clear up a few things on that, but discuss really two things that need to be in place to allow that, or to incentivize the shallowing of the club to happen. So when we're talking about shallowing, what do we mean? Well, when we get to the top of the golf swing, top of the backswing there, it's trying to get that club to come closer back to the original playing line. So if you used to draw a line from the shaft all the way up here with an iron in particular, you're trying to get that in the downswing, the club to just sit just above that line. You don't want it to be too far over, too far underneath. You're trying to shallow it nicely to get the club on a good plane, so you haven't got to compensate and do some funky things coming into impact to make contact. So the importance of shallowing, lots of different ways to do it, but I'm going to discuss a couple of key things that need to be in place first. So when people struggle with shallowing the club, there's two things that are generally out of place. First thing is that club face. So if you look at my club face orientation here, this would be considered at this stage of the swing a fairly neutral club face, whereby it's pretty much matching your spine. That would be considered open, and that would be considered closed or shut. So if you progress that to the top of the backswing, that's relatively matching my forearm, my lead forearm. That would be considered shut. That would be considered open with it hanging down. Now, the biggest thing that I find for players that struggle to shallow it is from the club face. I often talk about club face being king. Now, if that's open, if that's too open at the top of the swing, then we've really got no incentive to get that club shallow. So if this club's open at the top here, and we're trying to shallow it in the downswing and get our body moving in the correct manner, get our arms lowering and the club shallowing, look how open that golf club is there. And if you continue on that path into impact, that ball's going to be flying way offline out to the right. So no incentive to shallow. So what happens generally from there is the club then has to, and the player has to get the club to work out, very steep, in an effort to square the club face up to start the ball somewhat online. So the first ingredient that needs to be in there is a more functional or reasonable club face position at the top of the backswing. So that's the first thing I want you guys to note. So what influences the club face? Key things, three things really. It's set up. Where's your club face orientation? Is it set up, closed, open, or neutral? I'm going to assume that's fairly neutral. And second thing then is the grip. So let's assume you've got a fairly reasonable functional grip. Again, not different styles to grip the club, absolutely, that matches up with the swing. But just check that first. Won't go into massive details on that today. But the key thing that I think a lot of people can take is the third idea, which is how you control the club with your wrists and your forearms and your hands. So if you were to get to the golf club, assuming you've got a decent setup, assuming your grip's pretty functional, as we get to the top, if you're now getting an open club face, that would tend to be because of what you're doing with the wrists. Oftentimes people are trying to create a lot of lag or a lot of this angle here, which tends to get that lead wrist cupped, which opens the club face, which there's a lot of work to do from there, you can imagine, to try and get this club back in a shallowed position. So First thing to check, guys, is to where's your club face at the top of the swing. Film yourself if you can, or check yourself in the mirror. Generally, a pretty flat lead wrist is pretty good. You don't need to do any of these funky things that you're seeing for some of the top players in the world. Just generally pretty flat. It's a good idea for most players. And get that club face pretty square to even a little bit stronger, which now starts to incentivize the club coming more shallow, because from there, if you've got the club face in a more reasonable position, you're going to want to get it more shallow or back on plane in order to get a nice delivery into impact. So check that, guys, check that for number one. Number two would be, where are you positioning the club in the backswing? Now, for most everyday golfers that I see, I think a lot of players generally swing, and again, this is very personalized, so take this content that we do online as it is, and just, it's not for everybody. It's very specific when you're looking at why people may or may not shallow the club, or why they might be struggling. But this is just what I often see. And the second piece would be the backswing or the hand path in the club being too high. So what I mean by that, relative to the ball to target line, my hands and the club, the butt of the club, is generally too this way. Now, for a lot of players, that leaves a lot of work to get that club shallowed. So there's a lot of rerouting, there's a lot of work to do to get that club back in a good position. So for most players, generally tend to see in the backswing that club coming a little bit deeper around, the hands halfway back here being more opposite maybe your armpit or even the right bicep for a lot of players. So you get a little bit more depth to the swing, so that when you're at the top of the swing now, you see that the butt of the club's a little bit more over my heels as opposed to over my toes if you were to draw a straight line down from there. Now that helps a lot of players, because from there they can generally do what they normally do, and the club will be fairly shallow or in a more functional position here coming into impact. If you're up here, again, there's a lot of work to do. And the top of the backswing to impact is over like that. So it's a lot of work for the everyday golfer. So oftentimes, just putting the backswing in a slightly different position with a more functional club face is going to help that player get shallower on the downswing. So that's a couple of things to look for there. And then you start to see, so when you start to look at impact positions and the best players in the world getting their hips more open and getting into these kind of wonderful impact positions that we see online, there's a reason that they've got there. So yes, you want to understand how to do that, how that feels. But if your club's out of position, if you're steep, if you're not where you want to be, then you're not going to, so the body's going to react, it's going to stall, the hips are going to stall, we're going to stand up and do all these things to make reasonable contact, but you're not going to be incentivized to get into a good impact position. So before a good impact position comes, the club needs to be in a more functional or shallow position in the downswing. So you can imagine now, if I start to get the club, those two ingredients I said, a little bit more depth at the top with my hands and the club face in a more functional position. Now, as I come into the downswing and into delivery, the club face is in a good position, the club's beautifully on plane. Now, if I was to stand up and do that, the ball's going to fly left. So now your body's incentivized to work on those nice impact positions, to square the face up, to get that nice little bit of shaft lean that you see for the best players in the world. And again, shaft lean, maybe one for another video. We're not looking for crazy amounts. If you're a really fast swing speed player, you hit the ball a long way, you'd want a little bit more. If you're a bit of a slow swing speed player, you'd want a little bit less. So it's not about trying to get all that, but what happens before is going to incentivize, it's either going to help or hinder that impact position. So there's my key thoughts there, guys, on shallowing the club and the things that need to be in place in order to do that. In another video, we'll discuss, and I have discussed, how to get the hands and arms working and the body working to put that club nicely on plane. But they're the things that I tend to see most everyday golfers need in place. Club in a good position at the top, not too far here, nice position, and the club face in a more reasonable position. So you're going from that extreme to here. That's going to help most players get the club shallower in the downswing. So I hope that helps, and yeah, Give that a go. Let me know if there's any questions, because that's quite personalised, and let me know how you go with that. And thank you so much for watching. Look forward to seeing you on the next video.